What is the price of ambition? For billionaire Julian Croft, it was everything. He stood on the world stage, celebrating his greatest triumph, while the woman carrying his child, Amelia, stood alone on a desolate city street, shattered by a betrayal she never saw coming. She thought his greatest crime was forgetting their anniversary. She was wrong. A single haunting photograph taken in the dead of night would ignite a scandal, but it was the headline that followed, which would expose a truth so devastating it would bring an empire to its knees and a titan to his senses. This is the story of how one man's ruthless ambition collided with a secret he thought was buried forever. The air in the penthouse was worth more than most people's homes. Filtered, temperature-controlled, and scented with a bespoke blend of white tea and neroli that cost $1,000 an ounce, it was the air of the untouchable. It was the air Julian Croft had manufactured for himself 68 floors above the grimy, striving streets of Manhattan. From this vantage point, looking out of the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city was a silent, glittering tapestry, a kingdom he had conquered not with armies, but with algorithms. His wife, Amelia, however, felt like she was suffocating. She stood before the antique Venetian mirror in their sprawling dressing room, a space larger than her entire childhood apartment. The reflection showed a woman who should have been ecstatic. Her face, usually a canvas of gentle warmth, was framed by waves of honey-blonde hair. A bespoke gown of midnight blue silk clung to her figure, expertly tailored to celebrate the soft burgeoning curve of her 5-month pregnancy. On the velvet-lined tray beside her lay the Croft star, a diamond necklace Julian had purchased at a Sotheby's auction, so named because its flawless 50-carat center stone seemed to swallow the light and hold it captive. Everything was perfect. A perfect wife, a perfect home, a perfect jewel for their perfect 5th anniversary. Except it was all a lie. The perfection was a veneer as thin and fragile as spun glass. For the past year, Julian had been a ghost in their life. He was a phantom who smelled of expensive cologne and sleeplessness, his physical body often present at the breakfast table, but his mind leagues away, lost in the digital ether of his new obsession, Ethereum dynamics. It was his magnum opus, a predictive AI he claimed would revolutionize global logistics. To Amelia, it was the other woman, the one who got his passion, his late nights, his fervent whispered promises. Tonight was supposed to be different. A respite, their 5th anniversary. He had promised her, looking up from his glowing tablet, just long enough for his piercing blue eyes to meet hers, that tonight was solely for them. Dinner at Le Bernardin, the 3-Michelin-star temple of seafood, where a reservation was a myth for most mortals. He'd made the booking months ago. A beacon, he had called it, to remind us what we're working towards. Amelia smoothed the silk over her belly, feeling the faint butterfly flutter of the new life within her. Their child, a new beacon. She hoped with the fierce, desperate hope of a woman in love that this baby would be the anchor that finally moored Julian back to their shared reality. A chime from her phone sliced through the quiet. She picked it up from the marble-topped island, her heart giving a little squeeze of anticipation. Perhaps he was downstairs, waiting to surprise her. The message was from Julian. It was not a love note. J. Croft. Something's come up. Critical. Can't make it. Rain check. That was it. Not even a sorry or I love you. Just the cold, transactional efficiency that defined his business dealings. Rain check. As if their anniversary, the one he had promised to hold sacred, was a coffee meeting that could be bumped for a higher priority. Amelia's fingers trembled as she typed a reply, the slick screen blurring through the sudden welling of tears. Amelia, Julian, you promised. It's our anniversary. I'm all dressed, please. She stared at the screen, watching the three little dots that indicated he was typing. They appeared, danced for a moment, and then vanished. No reply came. He had read her plea and dismissed it. The silence was his answer. It was more brutal than any angry word could ever be. The Croft star on the velvet tray seemed to mock her, its brilliance cold and unforgiving. She had everything a woman could ever want the world told her. A billionaire husband, a life of unimaginable luxury. But in that moment, dressed in couture with a fortune around her neck, Amelia Croft had never felt so utterly devastatingly poor. The silence of the penthouse pressed in on her. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a cage. A beautiful gilded cage where she was left to pace alone while the man she loved conquered the world, forgetting he had already conquered her heart and left it undefended. Her gaze fell back to the phone. Another message had arrived. This one wasn't a text. It was a news alert from a tech publication. Headline: Ethereum Ascendant. Julian Croft, poised for surprise midnight launch, set to disrupt global tech landscape. Midnight. He wasn't just working late. He was hosting a launch event. He hadn't just forgotten their anniversary. He had scheduled his greatest professional triumph to deliberately overwrite it. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. He had lied not by omission, but by design. A wave of nausea, wholly unrelated to her pregnancy, washed over her. She gripped the edge of the marble island, her knuckles white. The blue silk dress suddenly felt like a costume for a part she no longer wanted to play. The beacon he had spoken of wasn't their anniversary. It was his company. The future he was working towards didn't include her. Not really. She was just a beautiful accessory for his public life. A single hot tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. Then another. She wouldn't let him see this. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of her breakdown. With a choked sob, she unclasped the Croft star and let it fall onto the velvet tray with a soft, final thud. The diamond's fire was extinguished in the plush blackness. Grabbing a simple cashmere wrap, she walked out of the dressing room, out of the silent penthouse, and into the coming storm, leaving the life he had built for her behind. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay there. Not anymore. The elevator descended 68 floors, in a whisper of polished steel and hushed mechanics. For Amelia, each descending floor felt like a step down into a colder, harsher reality. The bespoke neroli scent of the penthouse was replaced by the sterile, impersonal air of the lobby. The doorman, a kind man named George, with a perpetually cheerful smile, greeted her. "Mrs. Croft, your car is waiting." Mr. Croft called ahead, said you might be going out. His smile faltered slightly as he took in her appearance. The tear tracks on her cheeks were subtle, but her eyes, usually so full of light, were shadowed with a deep, consuming sadness. She had pulled the cashmere wrap tightly around herself, obscuring the anniversary gown, as if trying to hide from the evening itself. "Thank you, George," she murmured, her voice thin. "I won't be needing the car tonight. But, ma'am, it's starting to rain." He was right. A fine, misty drizzle had begun to fall, smudging the city lights into a blurry watercolor. The sky, which had been a clear, deep indigo just an hour ago, was now bruised with heavy, dark clouds rolling in from the Hudson. A storm was coming. "I like the rain," she lied, forcing a weak smile that didn't reach her eyes. She pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped out into the damp New York City air. The drizzle was cool against her hot skin. It felt real, tangible, a welcome shock after the sterile atmosphere of her home. She started walking with no destination in mind, her sensible heels clicking a lonely rhythm on the wet pavement of Columbus Circle. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Julian again. She braced herself for another curt, dismissive text. Instead, it was an automated calendar notification from their shared account. Event anniversary dinner. Amelia and Julian. Location Le Bernardin. Time 8:00 p.m. It was 8:15 p.m. The reminder was a digital ghost, a phantom of the evening that should have been. And in that moment, a reckless, heartbreaking idea took root in Amelia's mind. What if he had a change of heart? What if the critical issue was resolved quickly? What if, against all odds, he remembered his promise and went to the restaurant, hoping she would be there? It was a fool's hope, a tiny flickering flame in the face of a hurricane, but it was all she had. Clinging to that fragile possibility, she turned and began walking east towards the one place in the city she should be tonight. The rain began to fall in earnest now, the fine drizzle thickening into heavy, determined drops. The streets glistened like obsidian, reflecting the neon signs and the impatient glare of headlights. People scurried under awnings and unfurled umbrellas, a sea of hurried bodies seeking shelter. Amelia walked through them all, an island of deliberate, mournful slowness. Her cashmere wrap was quickly becoming soaked, its weight a heavy burden on her shoulders. The rain plastered strands of her carefully styled hair to her cheeks and forehead. She didn't care. The physical discomfort of the cold and the wet was a dull ache compared to the searing pain in her chest. Each step was a battle against the urge to turn back, to run home, and hide in the lonely opulence of their apartment. But the thought of Julian, perhaps sitting alone at their table waiting, propelled her forward. After a walk that felt both like an eternity and a few short seconds, she arrived. The iconic blue awning of Le Bernardin was a beacon of warmth and elegance in the stormy night. Through the large windows, she could see the soft golden glow of the dining room, a world away from the tempest outside. It was a sanctuary of celebration, filled with the murmur of happy conversations, the clinking of glasses, and the silent ballet of waiters. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, she pushed the heavy door open and stepped inside. The maitre d', a man of impeccable poise with silvering hair and a suit that cost more than her first car, approached her immediately. His professional smile was warm, but his eyes were quick, taking in her disheveled state. The wet wrap, the streaked makeup, the profound sadness that clung to her like the rain. "Good evening, madam. May I help you?" he asked, his voice a model of discretion. "I have a reservation," Amelia said, her own voice barely a whisper. "Under Croft. For two." The maitre d' consulted his large reservation book, his expression unreadable. "Ah, yes, Mr. Croft. We have been holding your table." He paused, looking from the book to her and then around the empty entrance. "Will Mr. Croft be joining you shortly?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken pity. Amelia's fragile hope shattered the pieces, scattering into the void where her heart used to be. He wasn't here. He was never coming. The fool's hope had been just that. She looked past the maitre d' into the heart of the restaurant. She saw couples leaning in close, their faces animated with laughter. She saw a family celebrating a milestone, their joy radiating from the table. Every single person was part of a we. She was a solitary I, a pregnant woman, standing alone in the doorway of the life she was supposed to have. "No," she finally managed to say the word, catching in her throat. "He won't be coming." The maitre d's' expression softened into one of genuine sympathy. "I see. Would you care to be seated anyway, Mrs. Croft? We can still serve you, of course." For a fleeting second, she considered it. The ultimate act of defiance. To sit alone at their anniversary table, order the most expensive champagne, and toast to her own resilience. But the thought of enduring the curious, pitying glances from the other diners was too much to bear. The performance of strength was beyond her tonight. All she had was the raw, unvarnished truth of her heartbreak. "No, thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. I have to go." She turned before he could say another word, pulling the door open and stepping back out into the deluge. The storm had fully broken now. The rain was a solid roaring sheet of water, hammering the pavement and overflowing the gutters. The wind whipped down the canyon of West 51st Street, cold and sharp, tearing at her soaked wrap. She didn't register the cold. She didn't register the cacophony of the city, the blaring horns, the distant wail of a siren. All she could hear was the frantic, painful thumping of her own heart. She started walking again, faster this time, driven by a desperate need to escape the warm, golden light of the restaurant and the life it represented. Tears streamed down her face, mingling with the rain so completely that she couldn't tell them apart. It was a baptism of sorrow. Each drop that fell from the sky felt like a tear shed for her broken marriage, for the promises Julian had shattered, for the child inside her who would be born into this fractured world. She was vaguely aware of the looks she was getting from the few people huddled under awnings. They saw a woman in a fancy, ruined dress, weeping uncontrollably as she walked through a torrential downpour. They saw madness or drama, or just another one of New York's strange, sad stories. They couldn't possibly understand the depth of the betrayal that had driven her out into the storm. After several blocks, her energy gave out. She came to a stop under the weak, flickering glow of a streetlight. Leaning against the cold, wet metal pole, she finally let the sobs rack her body. She slid down, heedless of the filthy puddle at the base of the pole, and sat on the cold, gritty sidewalk. Her midnight blue silk gown, a symbol of a celebrated love, was now stained and heavy with street water. She wrapped her arms around her belly, a primal protective gesture, as if she could shield her unborn child from the storm raging both outside and within her. She was a portrait of absolute desolation. Across the street, in the doorway of a closed art gallery, a man was sheltering from the rain. His name was Leo Martinez, a freelance photojournalist who had made a name for himself not by chasing celebrities, but by capturing the raw, unguarded soul of the city. He didn't cover galas, he covered life. His lens was drawn to authenticity, to the fleeting moments of profound human emotion that played out every day on the streets. He had been on his way home when the storm forced him to take cover. And then he saw her. Through the curtain of rain, he saw the lone figure of the woman under the streetlight. He saw the expensive dress, the utter lack of protection from the elements, and the posture of complete and total despair. He didn't know who she was. She could have been anyone. But in that moment, she was everyone who had ever been heartbroken, let down, or left behind. She was a universal symbol of sorrow. Leo lifted his camera, a weathered Leica M10 that felt like an extension of his own eye. He was careful to stay in the shadows, not wanting to intrude or exploit. This wasn't about paparazzi-style ambush. This was about bearing witness. He adjusted the focus, the streetlight creating a dramatic, almost cinematic highlight on her bowed head, the rain tracing silver tracks on her hair and shoulders. He saw her hands cradling her stomach, and his breath caught. She was pregnant. The story in his viewfinder deepened its emotional gravity, increasing tenfold. This wasn't just heartbreak. It was heartbreak with the highest possible stakes. He took the shot. A single silent click. The image he captured was devastatingly beautiful. The chiaroscuro of the light and shadow, the texture of the rain, the raw, unshielded agony on the woman's unseen face, conveyed through the slump of her shoulders and the protective curl of her body. It was one of the most powerful photographs he had ever taken. He knew with absolute certainty that this single frame told a 1,000-word story, a story of wealth, loneliness, and profound grief. He lowered his camera, a feeling of deep empathy washing over him. He felt a pang of guilt for capturing such a private moment, but also a stronger sense of journalistic duty. This image was important. It said something about the city, about the human condition. He had no idea of the seismic shockwave his photograph was about to unleash. He only knew that he had captured the truth, and the truth he believed always deserved to be seen. While Amelia was collapsing in the storm, Julian Croft was basking in the glow of 1,000 flashbulbs. The Ethereum Dynamics launch event was being held at the vessel at Hudson Yards, its iconic honeycomb-like structure lit up in the company's signature electric blue. Inside, the atmosphere was euphoric. Tech journalists, venture capitalists, and industry titans mingled, sipping champagne and buzzing with anticipation. Julian stood on stage, a master of his universe. The spotlight was his natural habitat. He wore a custom-tailored Tom Ford suit, his posture exuding an almost predatory confidence. Behind him, on a screen the size of a small building, the Ethereum logo pulsed like a giant digital heart. "Tonight, we are not just launching a product," he announced, his voice resonating with practiced charisma through the state-of-the-art sound system. "We are launching the future. Ethereum is not an evolution. It is a revolution. It will redefine efficiency, streamline global commerce, and usher in a new era of logistical intelligence. Tonight, we change the world." The crowd erupted in thunderous applause. Investors who had poured hundreds of millions into his vision cheered the loudest, their faces flush with the promise of astronomical returns. Julian smiled, a perfectly calibrated expression of triumph and humility. He felt the familiar, intoxicating rush of victory. This was what he lived for. The risk, the pressure, the ultimate world-beating success. This feeling was his drug. In the wings, his chief operating officer, a sharp, tireless woman named Sarah, handed him his phone. "They're streaming this live on every major platform. The engagement is off the charts. Ethereum Ascendant is trending #1 worldwide." "Excellent," Julian said, his eyes scanning the adoring crowd. His phone vibrated with an incoming call. The screen read, "Amelia." A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. He'd sent her the text. What more did she want? He silenced the call without a second thought, his thumb pressing the button with cold finality. A few seconds later, a text message appeared. "Amelia Julian. Where are you? I'm at the restaurant. I thought you might come. Please just call me." He read the message, and a pang of something uncomfortable, guilt perhaps, pricked at him. He pictured her there alone. He had promised. But then he looked out at the sea of powerful faces. All turned to him, their expressions a mixture of awe and envy. He heard the roar of his success. The guilt was a distant, muffled sound easily drowned out. She'll get over it, he thought, the justification forming instantly. I'll buy her a new car, a villa in Tuscany. She'll understand. This is for us, for our future. He put the phone in his pocket, compartmentalizing his wife's pain into a small, manageable box to be dealt with later. He spent the next few hours working the room, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, and giving interviews. He spoke of disruption and innovation of data points and predictive models. He was brilliant, charming, and utterly in control. Around 1 a.m., after the last of the journalists and investors had departed, Julian stood with his core team on the top level of the vessel, overlooking the rain-slicked city. The storm was finally subsiding, leaving behind a clean, electric-smelling air. They popped a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon, the cork echoing in the vast, empty space. To Ethereum, Sarah toasted, her eyes shining. To Ethereum, they all echoed. Julian took a long, satisfying drink. The champagne was crisp cold and tasted like victory. He felt invincible. He had outmaneuvered his rivals, dazzled the market, and secured his legacy. The cost of this victory, a broken promise, a lonely wife, felt in that moment like a regrettable but necessary expense. The price of greatness was always high. It was almost 3 a.m. when his driver dropped him at the entrance of their building. George, the doorman, was still on duty, his usual cheerfulness replaced by a look of concern. "Good evening, Mr. Croft. A successful night, I trust." "The best, George," Julian said, striding towards the elevator. "Mrs. Croft? She came back a while ago. She seemed very distressed, sir." Julian's stride faltered for a half-second. "She'll be fine. Thank you, George." He rode the elevator up, a sliver of apprehension finally piercing his bubble of self-congratulation. The penthouse was dark and silent. He called out her name, "Amelia." No answer. He walked through the vast, empty rooms. He found her in their dressing room, not physically, but her presence lingered. The midnight blue dress was gone. The cashmere wrap was gone. But on the black velvet tray, the Croft Star diamond lay like a fallen tear, its fire dead. And beside it, her phone. He frowned. Why would she leave her phone? He picked it up. The screen was dark. He walked to their bedroom. It was empty. The bed was pristine, untouched. A cold knot began to tighten in his stomach. He checked the guest rooms, the library, even the private gym. She was gone. He went back to the dressing room and turned on her phone. The lock screen was a picture of them from their honeymoon in Santorini, smiling happy a lifetime ago. He used his thumbprint to unlock it. He saw his own unanswered call, his unread text. Then he saw the news alert she had seen hours earlier, the one announcing his midnight launch. The knot in his stomach tightened into a ball of ice. He had not only broken his promise, he had been caught in a lie, and she had left. Not just for the evening, it seemed, but she had left. A sudden, urgent need to fix it, to control the situation, surged through him. He would find her. He would apologize. He would shower her with gifts and promises. He would make it right. He was Julian Croft. He could fix anything. He pulled out his own phone, ready to initiate a search, to call his security team to track her down. But as his screen lit up, it was already flooded. Notifications, texts, missed calls from his PR team, his COO, his investors. A sense of dread, cold and unfamiliar, washed over him. He ignored the calls and opened his browser. Every major news site, from the stuffy Wall Street Journal to the salacious Page 6, was leading with the same story. And the image, that one single image, was everywhere. He clicked on the New York Post. The headline in bold, aggressive letters screamed at him from the screen, a punch to the gut that knocked the air from his lungs and the triumph from his soul. The headline wasn't just words, it was a verdict. The lonely Empress tech titan, Julian Croft's pregnant wife, weeps in midnight storm as he toasts new empire. Beneath the brutal all-caps declaration was the photograph, Leo Martinez's photograph. It was a masterpiece of misery. It was Amelia, his Amelia, curled up at the base of a streetlight soaked to the bone, her body language screaming a pain so profound it felt obscene to be witnessing it. Her face was mostly hidden, but he could see the elegant line of her jaw, the rain-slicked strands of her blonde hair, and the protective, desperate way her arms were wrapped around her pregnant belly. The image was stark, devastating, and undeniable. Julian felt the world tilt on its axis. The air in the multi-million-dollar penthouse suddenly felt thin, unbreathable. He sank onto a plush ottoman, his legs unable to support him. He stared at the picture on his phone, his mind struggling to reconcile the image of the shattered woman in the rain with the graceful, composed wife he took for granted. He clicked through to the article. It was written by an award-winning journalist known for her sharp, insightful profiles. The prose was surgical. It juxtaposed the two scenes of the night with devastating effect. On one side, Julian Croft, the conquering hero, popping champagne and speaking of changing the world. On the other, his pregnant wife alone, abandoned weeping on a dirty sidewalk just a few miles away. The article detailed the occasion, their 5th wedding anniversary. It mentioned the reservation at Le Bernardin. It even had a quote from an anonymous source at the restaurant, likely the sympathetic maitre d' who described a heartbroken woman in a beautiful blue dress who had waited for a husband that never arrived. Then the article delved into Julian's public persona, the charismatic innovator, the philanthropic billionaire. It listed his donations, his speeches on work-life balance, his carefully crafted image as a modern, enlightened titan of industry. And then, with the photograph as its ultimate, irrefutable evidence, it tore that image to shreds. While Mr. Croft was speaking of a new era of logistical intelligence, the journalist wrote, he appears to have suffered a catastrophic failure of emotional intelligence at home. His new empire, it seems, was built tonight on a foundation of personal neglect and a broken promise. The public's reaction was instantaneous and savage. The Ethereum Ascendant hashtag, once a symbol of his triumph, had been hijacked. It was now flooded with the photograph of Amelia, with comments ranging from disgusted to furious. This is what success looks like. Disgusting. Congratulations on your launch, Julian Croft. You lost your soul in the process. My heart breaks for this woman and for their baby. He's not a titan, he's a monster. Cancel Croft. His phone started ringing again, a frantic, incessant buzzing. It was Sarah, his COO. He finally answered, his voice a hoarse croak. Sarah! Julian, have you seen it? Her voice was tight with panic. The stock, our pre-market trading is in free fall. We're down 30%, and the market hasn't even opened. The venture capital groups are calling emergency meetings. The board is demanding a statement. What the hell happened? Who is this woman? Julian flinched as if struck. Who is this woman? It's Amelia. Sarah. It's my wife. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Oh my God, Julian, she finally whispered. Oh my God, I didn't. We have a Category 5 hurricane of a PR crisis. The narrative is out of control. They're calling you the billionaire brute, the worst husband in America. We have to get ahead of this. a statement of apology, a joint photo op something, a joint photo op. The suggestion was so grotesquely corporate, so utterly tone-deaf to the reality of the situation that Julian felt a surge of rage. A photo op, Sarah? Look at that picture. Do you think she wants to stand next to me and smile for the cameras? He hung up, his mind racing. This wasn't a PR crisis. That was a sterile business term for what this really was, a personal cataclysm. He had not just upset his wife, he had publicly humiliated her in the most spectacular way imaginable. He had turned her private pain into a global spectacle. And the worst part, the part that made his blood run cold, was that he was entirely to blame. His justifications from the night before, she'll get over it, I'll buy her something, now seemed like the pathetic delusions of a moral bankrupt. What could he possibly buy to erase this image from the internet, from the public consciousness, from her memory? He had to find her. Not for a photo op, not to save his stock price, but because a primal fear was now gripping him. The woman in that photograph looked like she was at the very edge of her endurance. She was pregnant with his child. Was she safe? Was she okay? He scrambled to his feet and ran back to the bedroom, throwing open closets, his heart pounding with a terror that eclipsed any fear he'd ever felt in a boardroom. Her suitcase was gone. A few of her clothes were missing. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision to get some air. She had packed. She had left him. He grabbed his keys, his mind a chaotic whirl of regret and fear. He had to find her. He had to beg her for forgiveness. He had to undo this. He sprinted out of the penthouse, leaving the lights on, the silence of the vast apartment pressing in on him. As he raced to the elevator, he thought he knew the full extent of his monstrous mistake. He thought the headline and the photograph were the worst of it. He was wrong. The real story, the one that would detonate the foundations of his entire life, hadn't even broken yet. The photograph was just the fuse. The bomb was still to come. Julian spent the next few hours in a state of frantic desperation. He drove through the pre-dawn city, his mind a maelstrom of self-loathing. He went to the homes of Amelia's two closest friends, waking them up with frantic knocking, only to be met with cold, furious glares. They knew. They had seen the news, and they weren't telling him anything. "You did this, Julian," one of them, a fiery redhead named Chloe, said through a crack in the door, her voice dripping with contempt. "She gave you everything, and you threw it in the gutter for a line of code. Leave her alone." The door slammed in his face. He was an outcast, the architect of his own exile. Defeated, he returned to the penthouse just as the sun was rising, casting a pale, indifferent light over the city. He felt like a stranger in his own home. The luxury that had once been a symbol of his success now felt obscene, a monument to his failures as a man. He collapsed onto the sofa and stared at his phone, watching his empire crumble in real time. Ethereum's stock had opened in a bloodbath, wiping out billions in valuation. News outlets were no longer just running the photograph, they were digging. Every aspect of his life was now under a microscope. It was an investigative journalist from the New York Times, a woman with a reputation for unearthing secrets powerful men wanted to keep buried, who delivered the killing blow. At 9:00 a.m., a new story dropped, and this one made the tale of the neglected wife seem like a mere prelude. Julian's phone buzzed with an alert. He opened it with trembling hands. Headline: The Croft Calculus leaked documents reveal Ethereum launch was a deliberate attack on family. Julian's blood turned to ice. Family. What the hell were they talking about? He read on his heart, hammering against his ribs. The article was meticulously researched, citing leaked internal emails and anonymous sources from deep within his own company. It laid out a timeline that was both brilliant in its corporate strategy and diabolical in its personal cruelty. The journalist had discovered that Ethereum's main competitor in the predictive logistics space was a smaller but highly innovative company called Nexus Logistics. For the past year, Nexus had been Julian's primary obsession, the David to his Goliath that he was determined to crush. And the CEO and founder of Nexus Logistics was a man named Daniel Sterling, Amelia's older brother. Julian felt the floor drop out from under him. The article laid it all bare. Daniel and Amelia had been incredibly close until her marriage to Julian, a man Daniel had never trusted. He'd called Julian a soulless calculator with a heartbeat, a warning Amelia had dismissed as sibling jealousy. The two men had maintained a frosty, distant relationship for years, a silent corporate Cold War. The leaked emails showed Julian's strategy in horrifying detail. He knew Nexus Logistics was planning to announce a major partnership with a European shipping conglomerate on a specific date, the date of his and Amelia's 5th wedding anniversary. This partnership would have secured Nexus's future and made it a formidable rival. So Julian had orchestrated a ruthless corporate ambush. He had deliberately scheduled the Ethereum launch for the same night, but made it a surprise last-minute announcement to maximize disruption. He pushed his team to an insane deadline, not for technical reasons, but to ensure he could preempt his brother-in-law's announcement. By launching with so much fanfare, Ethereum would suck all the media oxygen out of the room, making the Nexus news seem insignificant, old, and irrelevant by morning. He wasn't just launching a product, he was assassinating a competitor, his wife's brother's company. The most damning piece of evidence was a single chilling email Julian had sent to his COO Sarah a month prior. From J. Croft to S. Chen. Subject: launch date. Sarah moved the A-Day launch. New date is October 25th. It's non-negotiable. I want to dominate the entire news cycle for 24 hours. No other tech news should even register. Sterling won't know what hit him. This is how you kill a company without firing a single shot. October 25th, their anniversary. The journalist connected the dots with devastating precision. Julian hadn't forgotten his anniversary. He hadn't just prioritized work over his wife. He had used their anniversary. It was the perfect cover. Amelia would think he was a neglectful fool, a workaholic who'd made a terrible mistake. She would never suspect the truth that the date was chosen with cold, calculating intent, that her heartbreak was merely collateral damage in his war against her brother. The public reaction shifted from sympathy for a neglected wife to pure, unadulterated rage at a manipulative monster. The story was no longer about a bad husband. It was about a man who would weaponize his own marriage, who would sacrifice his wife's happiness and her family's livelihood on the altar of his own ambition. Julian dropped the phone. It clattered to the marble floor. He staggered to the window and looked out at the city, but he didn't see it. He saw Amelia's face, her tear-streaked cheeks in the rain. He saw her brother Daniel's face, the last time they'd spoken, full of distrust and concern for his sister. He had told himself he was building an empire for his family, for Amelia and their child. But that was the greatest lie of all. He had been building it only for himself, and he had been willing to burn down her entire world to lay the foundation. A sound, a guttural, animalistic cry of pure agony tore from his own throat. It was the sound of a man who had just realized he hadn't just lost his company's reputation or a fortune in stock value. He had lost his humanity. He had meticulously planned his own destruction, and he hadn't even realized it until the whole world was watching him burn. The phone on the floor began to ring again. It was a number he didn't recognize. He picked it up, his hand shaking. "Hello," he rasped. The voice on the other end was calm, cold, and filled with a righteous fury that cut him to the bone. "Croft," the voice said. "It's Daniel Sterling. You wanted to know where my sister is. She's with me, and you will not come near her again. Not now, not ever. You wanted a war, Julian. Congratulations, you've got one." The line went dead, but Daniel's words echoed in the cavernous silence of the penthouse. "You will not come near her again." The finality in his voice was absolute. Julian had been locked out, not by a door, but by a wall of his own making, bricked with deceit and mortared with cruelty. His first instinct was the one that had always served him: deploy resources. He had a team of the best security consultants and private investigators money could buy. He could find Amelia in an hour. He reached for his phone to make the call, but his hand stopped mid-air. What would he do if he found her? Drag her home? Force a confrontation? He looked at the picture on the news site again. The image of his weeping, pregnant wife. Forcing anything on her now would be the act of a tyrant, proving every terrible thing the world was saying about him. He had already broken her. He couldn't bear the thought of shattering her completely. For the first time in his adult life, Julian Croft felt utterly powerless. His money couldn't fix this. His influence was toxic. His power was the very reason he had lost everything that mattered. The next few days were a blur of humiliating capitulations. He was forced to issue a public statement drafted by a crisis management team that charged $10,000 an hour. It was a milquetoast apology full of corporate speak like "deeply regret, personal failings, and taking time to reflect." No one believed it. It was seen for what it was: a desperate attempt to stop the financial bleeding. It didn't work. The board of Ethereum Dynamics, facing shareholder revolt and catastrophic brand damage, called an emergency meeting. Julian attended via video call, a ghost in his own machine. The faces of the people who had once lauded him as a visionary were now cold masks of fury and disappointment. "The brand is toxic, Julian," one of the lead investors told him, his voice flat. "It's inextricably linked to this scandal. As long as you are the face of Ethereum, we are dead in the water." The message was clear. He had to go. He had to sacrifice his creation to save it. With a hollow feeling in his chest, he agreed to step down as CEO, effective immediately. The king had been deposed, exiled from the very empire he had built. He spent his days wandering the silent penthouse, a prisoner in his gilded cage. He didn't turn on the TV. He didn't read the news. The roar of the outside world was deafening enough in his own mind. He replayed every moment of the last year, every decision, every lie. He saw his ambition for what it was: a ravenous cancer that had consumed his character, his marriage, and his soul. He tried to reach Amelia, but her number was disconnected. He sent emails that went unanswered, swallowed by the digital void. He sent a bouquet of her favorite flowers, white peonies, to her brother's address, a pathetic, desperate gesture. He imagined they were thrown in the trash. He found himself standing in the nursery they had designed together. It was painted a soft, gentle yellow. A custom-made mobile with tiny, hand-carved wooden animals hung over the empty crib. They had argued playfully over whether to get a rocking chair or a glider. He had insisted on the most expensive, ergonomically designed glider, obsessed with getting the optimal product. Amelia had just wanted a comfortable chair to hold their baby. Standing there in that room full of silent promise, the full weight of his loss crashed down on him. It wasn't about the company or the money. It was about this: the quiet moments, the shared future, the family he had annihilated before it was even born. He sank onto the floor, leaned his head against the crib, and wept. Not the tears of a thwarted billionaire, but the gut-wrenching, soul-cleansing tears of a man who has finally truly understood what he has done. A week after his resignation, a sleek black car pulled up outside his building. A woman in a sharp business suit got out and was let up by the doorman. It was Daniel Sterling's lawyer. She didn't greet him. She simply placed a thick manila envelope on his coffee table. "Mr. Sterling asked me to deliver this to you personally," she said, her tone icy. "He trusts you will see that it is in everyone's best interest to cooperate fully." Inside the envelope were divorce papers, and beneath them a single sheet of paper with a hospital letterhead, New York Presbyterian. It was a printout from Amelia's file, a short note handwritten by her obstetrician. Patient admitted due to acute stress and risk of complications. Placed on mandatory bed rest for the remainder of her term. Minimal stress and absolute quiet are medically necessary for the health of both mother and child. Julian's breath hitched. His actions, his ruthless, calculated ambition, hadn't just broken his wife's heart. They had endangered the life of his own child. The recklessness of his choices now had a potential body count of 1. That single piece of paper was his true reckoning. It was the final damning evidence of his monstrosity. The war he'd wanted to win had nearly claimed the most innocent of casualties. He looked at the divorce papers, at the cold legal language that would dissolve his marriage. He picked up the pen that the lawyer had so thoughtfully left behind. There was no fight left in him. He had no right to contest, no right to ask for anything. He only had the right to accept his sentence. He signed every page his signature, a shaky scrawl, a testament to his brokenness. He was Julian Croft, the man who had changed the world, and he had signed away his own. Signing the divorce papers was an act of unconditional surrender. Julian's pen hovered over the pages, the legal language, a cold epitaph for his marriage. Amelia, through her brother Daniel, had asked for nothing, no money, no property, just a clean severance. This quiet rejection was a louder condemnation than any shouted accusation. He signed away his claim to their life together, his shaky signature the only testament to the man he had broken. His lawyers were instructed to create an untouchable trust for the baby, a vast silent apology his son would one day inherit. It was the only way he could provide a fatherhood of cold, hard cash. The penthouse, once a symbol of his ascent, now felt like the scene of a crime. The glittering cage held too many ghosts. He sold it along with the cars, the watches, and the other trappings of the man he no longer wanted to be. He moved into a nondescript downtown apartment, a self-imposed exile where the silence was a constant companion. The roar of the world faded. The Ethereum scandal became old news, and Julian Croft, the fallen titan, became a cautionary tale. His days were spent in quiet reflection and brutal therapy sessions with a woman who refused to accept his excuses. He spoke not of market caps, but of shame, a concept he was only beginning to understand. He was a man adrift, stripped of his titles, and his purpose forced to confront the moral void at his core. He adhered to the terms of his exile with absolute fidelity, knowing his presence was a poison to Amelia and their unborn child. His absence was the only kindness he had left to offer. 2 months later, in the deep quiet of late December, a formal email arrived from Daniel's lawyer. Amelia Croft gave birth to a healthy baby boy this morning. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. No name, no picture, just the clinical facts. A son. His son was in the world, a world Julian was barred from. The news brought a profound, sorrowful ache. He was a father, yet he was nothing to this child. The gulf between them felt infinite. Regret without action, his therapist had told him, was just self-pity. He knew he had to build something not from ambition, but from atonement. He liquidated a significant portion of his remaining fortune and established the Sterling Foundation. He named it in honor of the family he had tried to destroy. Its mission was to promote ethical technology and support families crushed by the corporate machine he had once championed. It was his penance, an attempt to turn the poison he'd spread into some kind of antidote. 1 month after his son's birth, he allowed himself a final, desperate act of communication. He wrote a letter. Not a text or an email, but a handwritten confession on simple cream paper. It took him a week to find the words. It was not a plea for forgiveness. It was a testament to his guilt. He sent it via courier to Daniel's office with a simple plea on the envelope. Please give this to Amelia. He had no right to hope she would read it. Amelia sat in the soft morning light of her new life. The nursery in Daniel's home was a world away from the cold glass tower, smelling of baby powder and peace. In her arms, she held her son, Leo. She had named him after the photographer whose lens had inadvertently set her free, capturing a truth that had shattered her world only to allow her to rebuild it. Leo slept, his tiny hand wrapped around her finger. He was her anchor, her proof of survival. The storm felt like a lifetime ago. Daniel entered quietly, holding a single envelope. This came for you. She knew the handwriting. A jolt of old pain shot through her. Her first instinct was to burn it, to protect the fragile piece she had fought so hard to find. But she looked at Leo, this perfect child who was half his father, and knew she had to read it. For her son's sake, she had to know if the man who created him had any capacity for change. When Leo was asleep in his crib, she sat by the window and opened the letter. It was not what she expected. There were no excuses. It was a raw, unflinching autopsy of his own soul. Amelia, it began. I am writing this not to ask for forgiveness, as I have no right to it, but to offer the explanation you are owed. I have spent every moment since that night trying to understand how I became the man who could inflict such pain on you. The answer is simple and monstrous. I valued winning above all else. I lied about the launch. I chose our anniversary with the specific intent of destroying your brother's company. Your pain was a calculated, acceptable loss in my pursuit of dominance. It is the most shameful act of my life. I did not just betray you as a husband. I betrayed you as a human being. Seeing you in that rain, knowing I was the cause, was the beginning of my reckoning. But understanding I had put our child's life at risk That was the moment the man I was died. I hope he is gone forever. I know I cannot be a part of your life or our son's. My presence is a reminder of the damage I caused. The Sterling Foundation is not a ploy. It is my attempt to make amends with the world, to build something that helps instead of harms. I will not contact you again. I will respect the new life you have built. I just wanted you to know the truth from me, and to say the words I should have said 1,000 times. I am sorry, Amelia, for everything. Julian. Amelia read the letter twice. The tears that fell were not of pain, but of a complex, sorrowful catharsis. It was a full confession. He finally understood. She folded the letter and looked at her sleeping son. The future remained a vast, uncharted territory. She didn't know if forgiveness was possible, or what role, if any, Julian would ever have in Leo's life. The wounds were too deep to be healed by a single letter, but as she watched her son's gentle breathing, she felt a flicker of possibility. The tragic first chapter of their story was over. A new one, of a mother's fierce love, a son's bright future, and a fallen man's long walk out of the darkness had just begun. That photograph captured a moment of absolute despair, but it became a catalyst for a truth that needed to be exposed. Amelia's story isn't just about a rich man's mistake. It's about the devastating cost of ambition when it's untethered from humanity. It's a story of profound betrayal, but also one of incredible resilience and the quiet strength it takes to rebuild a life from the ashes. Julian's journey from a titan to a penitent shows that sometimes you have to lose everything you think you want to finally understand what you truly need. What did you think of Julian's ruthless twist? Could you ever forgive a betrayal like that? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective is a huge part of our community. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a story of epic downfall and powerful redemption. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales that uncover the secrets hidden behind closed doors.